Welcome back. Time for the legal roundup. Today we have a big development in the infamous G.I. Joe case. Could Flint, Michigan's ongoing water crisis bankrupt the city, and more trouble for a major restaurant chain? Joining me for the roundup today, criminal defense attorney Brian Claypool. Brian, it's good to see you. Let's get it started. First up, a story we reported on last hour. Big development in the case surrounding the late Illinois police officer Joe Glenowitz. He was the disgraced cop, in case you don't know, known as G.I. Joe, who staged his suicide to make it look like he died, a hero in the line of duty. Now his widow, Melody, has been indicted for taking funds from a charity she helped run with her late husband. She claims, Brian, that she was unaware of her husband's secret life. But there's a lot of evidence against her, including potentially incriminating text messages. Brian, is this an open and shut case, or could this be a wife that really didn't know what her husband was doing?
Yeah, this is not a slam dunk case. You have to look at, for example, the text messages, and also you need to look at the bylaws of this nonprofit that he had set up to show whether she actually had authority to withdraw any money from the charity. That's the starting point. But another good argument in her favor is, hey, wait a minute, he didn't die until September of 2015. He might have been doing this for years without her knowing. Why would she have access to this prior to him committing suicide? And another thing, too, is in order to prove money laundering, you have to prove that she knew that this was an illegal activity or had reason to know. And she's going to argue, hey, wait a minute, I was just simply the recipient of this money. I didn't know what my husband was doing. And why would he kill himself? The fact that he committed suicide supports her defense.
Well, that's exactly what I was thinking. I think the thing that complicates this the most is really the timeline, when she would have known as to what was going on. Was she actually involved, or did she find out later on? And if she did find out later on, would she still be sort of part of it?
Well, that's a great point. And again, the argument for her defense, if I'm representing her, I'm saying, look, she didn't have access to this account until the earliest of September of 2015.
Right.
So what happened after he committed suicide? If there's no activity of any money shifting out of the nonprofit at that point in time, she's got a solid defense that she did not know that her husband was using these funds to finance their personal lifestyle.
Yeah, we'll have to see how this plays out, because a lot of eyes are going to be on that case. Chipotle, still trying to recover from the public image nightmare after several food safety incidents. Now the chain has a new problem, Brian. Sexual discrimination allegations. 3 former managers have filed a suit against the chain, claiming they were fired just because they are women. Now, in this suit, they claim their boss called them overweight and emotional female employees. Chipotle's lawyers say the manager in question fired men also, and that the 3 women were let go because of well-documented performance issues. Now, Brian, the thing is, the trial, it's underway right now, right? So Chipotle's lawyers say their performance problems are documented, but it was the boss that they're accusing of all of these things, that wrote those performance documents. So does that cause a problem?
It does cause a problem, because if I'm representing Chipotle, you're going to have to get evidence of other chains, other franchises of Chipotle, showing that they hire women just as much as they hire men, and that the salaries of the two are equal. In other words, you've got to make this case bigger than just these women, because if the guy that fired these women is the only person complaining about them, then they've got a problem. But again, another important point here is legally, it's still a daunting task to prove this, because these employees are what's called at will. They don't have a written contract.
Right.
So you can basically fire them for any reason except if there's discrimination. These women are going to have to prove there's a pattern in practice at Chipotle to hire and fire women for no good reason, and that the salaries are not equal. That's a tough task.
We've been talking about this next story for the last couple of weeks, the Flint water crisis. It's been all over the news. There's been so much outrage over the handling of this contaminated water that has led in it. There are multiple suits now in the making, some civil, some by the same person. There's going to be many more. I can only imagine, probably thousands of suits that are going to come up. How do we even begin to tackle something like this? And do we see this as being one huge civil suit, or are they going to be each individual suits?
Well, it could be both. That's a great question. initially you might have a large camp of injured residents who have filed in a class action suit. But remember, the statute of limitations in Michigan is stayed. In other words, it stops until one of the residents notices symptoms that they were harmed by the water. That could take another few years. So until the symptoms manifest, that's what triggers when you file the lawsuit. So you might have a class action now, and then years from now, you might have other individuals who are now showing symptoms of the toxic water filing separate lawsuits.
And you spoke to my producer earlier, Brian, and you mentioned that because it's Flint, there may be more complications. Why?
Well, I really believe, by the way, I've handled a lot of child abuse cases out here in California, and I've seen that the areas that are targeted the most for child abuse are low-income, predominantly African-American or Hispanic communities. And I think the same kind of rationale applies here. If this disaster had happened in a town at Beverly Hills, for example, out here, trust me, this would have been taken care of a lot quicker, because folks in Beverly Hills have a deep pocket to finance campaigns for these legislators. And I think they targeted this community. They found out about it over 2 years ago, in my belief, and they didn't do anything about it. And I also believe that the federal government should be investigated, because they should have made sure that this water did not become so toxic. They've got to follow federal guidelines. They didn't either. So, and you got to be worried about a bankruptcy too, if this city, if they get all these lawsuits.
So you really think that because Flint residents don't have deep pockets, it's going to take a lot longer, right?
Well, I think because these residents didn't have deep pockets, that the city of Flint thought they could get away with this because these folks wouldn't have a voice. They wouldn't speak up, and they wouldn't hold the city accountable.
Yeah.
Now that the city's being held accountable, they need to worry about huge implications.
Yeah. All right, Brian Claypool, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right.